Hello, for those of you that are logging on, and I see we're clocking up by the minute here. Just to let you know, we're in the IBBC Tech Forum seminar, and you're not in another one, so we're in the right place. We're expecting a few more to log on, and then we'll start. While we're here, I just want to mention that we've got a very good turnout. We've got over 120 signed up to this. And internet allowing, we'll hopefully have quite a few of those listening in. But just to greet some of our members who are here, for example, HHL, law firm, AMS, the Baghdad Chamber of Commerce, hello, Basra Gateway Terminal, Capital Bank of Jordan, CCC, very excitingly, the Central Bank of Iraq are logging on. Equally, Crescent Petroleum, Embassy of the Republic of Iraq in the UK, Ernst & Young, we have G4 Risk, G4S, and on top of that we have managing partners, KPMG, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for Iraq, the Ministry of Higher Education and Scientific Research, Najaf Chamber of Commerce, hello, PwC, hello, Sardar Trading Agencies, Serco from the UK, SNC Lavlan, Sterling Education, hello there Tim, Turnkey, the University of Northampton, the World Bank, and we also understand the Ministry of Communication. That was the latest. We've had a few more logons since then, but thank you all, and all those that aren't members, welcome to IBBC. I've just got a call here. It might be our other panelist, I have a feeling. Thank you all very much for logging on. I just got to take this call, if that's all right. Hello. Hello. Just a message to our administration, Agni, if you could possibly send Amar the link for the panelists again, please, so he can log on. Thank you.
Of course, will do.
Thank you. So we're just waiting for our final panelist to join us. And I see we have quite a few participants now signed up. Thank you very much. Today, I may as well start talking about what's going on. Welcome to our e-government panel. And the topic is how e-government can benefit Iraq. And we have three speakers, Miss Alex Seagrove, UK Cabinet Office from the Government Digital Service, and she's the International Lead for International Delivery. Mr. Ismail Maraka, who's from PwC, Chairman of the Middle East Region Board and Country Senior Partner. Mr. Amar Shubar, who is hopefully logging on very soon, a partner at Management Partners, and I'm Ashley Goodall from the IBBC. So we're going to be discussing a number of things today, but just to preface this with something that came out from the Iraqi cabinet this week. Really, they've created an emergency cell for financial reform, and there are a number of things that they are decreeing that they want to look at and to accelerate. First of them is supporting the expansion of the private sector and encouraging investment, which is something IBBC is very keen on. Secondly, introducing automation and simplifying procedures in the public sector, which of course is very e-government driven. And the third point that's relevant is expanding the electronic payment system for salaries and pressing ahead with the e-government project. So this is a very encouraging sign from the current Iraqi government, and hopefully, if any of them are listening in here today, the conversation we're going to have should take things a lot further. So initially, I'm going to invite Alex Seagrove from the UK Government Cabinet Office, GDS, to talk about what e-government is and what are the experiences of it in the UK. And following that, we'll have Amar Shuba, I hope, when he's logged on, and Ismail Maraka. And then we'll have a more open discussion, after which you'll be free to pose questions. Hopefully, if you can write them on the chat line, questions only, please. Then we can then ask them to the panel. So first of all, if I'd like to invite Alex Seagrove to unmute herself, I look forward to hearing from you, Alex. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley, and thank you so much for inviting me to talk today, and for everyone tuning in. As Ashley said, my name is Alex Seagrove, and I am Head of International Delivery at the Government Digital Service. And what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about the Government Digital Service as sort of the transformative power of digital government in the UK, and how we got where we are, but also some of the principles that we follow when we're thinking about digital services and digital government. So hopefully I'll be able to rattle through that in the next 5 minutes. So the Digital Government Service in the UK sits in our Cabinet Office, which is similar to a President's Office or a Prime Minister's Office. It's at the centre of government, and it leads the government digital function. And that really is around helping departments to build and support transactional services that are digital by default and focused around users' needs. So I'm just following my notes. So in the UK, when we talk about digital government, we mean the provision of guidance. So making sure it's very clear to citizens what they can do, how they do it, what's the entitlement, and those transactional services for citizens, businesses, and also for civil servants. The business of government is enormous, and so we think of civil servants as users as well. And the UK takes a digital by default approach to delivering public services. So in a new service that's built, it should be digital by default. However, we have a responsibility to balance that with the accessibility and inclusivity of our users. And we recognise that government delivers services through a variety of channels, including online, the telephone, and face-to-face, depending on what it is. GDS's job was and remains to help the UK government design digital services and make them so straightforward and convenient and cost-effective that people prefer to use them. It's less about cables and telecoms. That's something that in the UK we let the private sector take a lead on and we become consumers of. However, these are obviously a key enabler of an accessible and inclusive digital government. Now, very, very briefly, the history of GDS starts in about 2010, so a decade ago. About that time, the UK was coming out of the financial crisis and pressure was on the government to deliver more for less, and that has not changed, and I suspect won't for the short time. Digital capability in the UK had been outsourced to private suppliers. The UK was very dependent on them, and it wasn't really clear that there was value for money being delivered. There was no digital capability within the civil service, and something had to change. We had a minister at the time called Francis Maude who was pivotal to creating the perfect storm for change and the perfect conditions for change. He had been a long-term civil servant. However, he saw this as his last role in government, which means he had a lot of capital to spend, political capital to spend. And he was up for doing something really revolutionary. And the first thing he did was ask one of the UK digital advisors, Dame Martha Name Fox, to write a report about our website at the time, which was called DirectGov, which was a portal kind of website. Instead, she didn't do what she was asked and wrote a 4-page letter instead of a 120-page report. And it was called Revolution, Not Evolution. And that looked not just at DirectGov, but public digital services as a whole. And the main theme was that there needed to be a central body looking after digital and that wholesale change was required. As a result of this report, Government Digital Service was created. And the first thing that we did was to build gov.uk, the single government website for all of government. And as a result of that, we actually closed down hundreds and hundreds of domains and subdomains of like other websites. Over 300 organisations across government moved on to gov.uk. So overall, we replaced nearly 2,000 websites. And the financial cost of the saving of that was that we saved £6.3 million a year on closing all of the individual websites and moving them into one central place onto gov.uk. One second. So that's a very, very, very high level and quick lesson on how GDS started. But what that gave us, the success of gov.uk, gave us the space to pursue a much more proactive digital agenda in government, which we think of as the foundations of digital government in the UK. And I've got 5 sort of key elements that I'm going to talk through here. And the first of these is to start with user needs. And these are user needs, not government needs. A user could be a citizen, or they could be a civil servant, or they could be someone wanting to start a business, or they could be a policymaker out in a department. So we're kind of thinking about what are all of those needs, and how does someone get what they need to do done. The next element of our principles is about making things open. And by open, I mean things like open source, open data, open standards, open communities, thinking about the wider digital economy and digital market, and also having a change to an open culture, which was quite significant in a traditional organisation such as government. And one of the ways that we thought about making things open was in common tools. We saw that the government faced the same core challenges repeatedly: updating people on the status of their application or their passport, taking and making payments, proving someone's identity, and hosting data. So this meant that if we created some digital components that addressed solving these common problems, we could make things run more easily and quickly and cost effectively. So we created a suite of common tools that were available for the whole public sector. We started developing those for central government, but now they're open to our local authorities, to the police, and our National Health Service. And so some of the components that we've been looking at is a common payments platform, a private sector run verification identity system. And the aim of our toolkits is to make services easier and cheaper to run, to minimise supplier lock-in, to minimise impact on operational processes, and help departments meet our service standard by testing them with users time and time again on their behalf, and to ensure that they're secure by default. And we always try and build components so good that people prefer to use them than a locked-in supplier product. We also felt, as one of the UK's largest procurers of digital data and technology products and services, that we had a responsibility to give as many players in the market the opportunity to bid for work with us. So another one of our key principles was really around reforming procurement and spend and shaping the market. I'm going to go into a little more detail on this. In 2009, IT, or the ITC, was costing the UK government £16 billion, which was about 1% of the economy and far too much. So we helped to solve this problem by introducing what we called spend controls, which was essentially devolved authority from Treasury for us to review and approve any spend on digital data and technology in government. And to start with, we set a £0 limit on that, so everything had to go through. Now the threshold, is over £100,000, so people have a little bit more freedom than they used to, but that really helped us kind of have a carrot and a stick approach to helping departments with the new challenges that we were putting in front of them with digital transformation. It also meant that we could affect that culture change. Although we couldn't just say no to someone, we had to offer them a solution. And quite often we would offer them a solution by either presenting them with one of our own common products, or asking them to look at other departments who had done something similar and asking if there was a way that they could collaborate. Now that's a very, very simplified version of what's a very complicated area. But this was a key part in how we managed to stop unnecessary expenditure and deliver value for money and sustainable reform. As part of that, and to help individual departments and agencies to understand how to provide these opportunities to a wider market, we created an online digital marketplace, which was a series of online frameworks to help government buy products and services from the public sector. And basically, when you sign up as a supplier to the frameworks, you sign up to common terms and conditions. What that means in reality now is that procurement can take as little as 5 to 6 weeks. And you can go to market and get an individual skill set, for example, a user researcher or a data scientist, or you can get an entire team to help you deliver a prototype or a pilot. So we also have regulations in place that means that no contract can be for longer than 2 years. So this promotes it promotes fair and open conditions for all suppliers. And it means that with our open set of standards, it means that we're able to create a technology stack based on open standards that is sustainable, it's future-proofed, and we mean that we're not locked into any proprietary software, which is quite important to us. So when GDS began, the list of government suppliers was very small. There was possibly about 19 providers, and most of them were based in London. Now with the digital marketplace, we have over 4,000 suppliers on our frameworks. And of those suppliers, over 3,800 of them are now SMEs. We set ourselves a goal that out of every £3 that we spent, £1 would go to an SME, and we've bet that number, and now out of every £3 that the government spends on digital data and technology, £1.30 is going to an SME. So we've really made significant changes to our digital economy by doing so, and the location spread of our suppliers is all across the United Kingdom, which is great. Moving on quickly, our fourth point was around data. Data is important, it underpins everything, and we have 3 key objectives around data, which is enabling the delivery of better services through better access to good data, driving open, trusted and ethical approaches to data, and supporting innovation and making our data science capability able to make better use of data. And finally, building capability. And in the UK government now, a common structure exists for the 37 digital data and technology job roles and career paths in the government. And we call this the Digital Capability Framework. This framework describes the roles that are needed in the profession and the skills required to do a role. We're often competing with the private sector in the UK, as every government is. So ensuring that people believe that the government is a good place to have a digital career is important in order for us to get those skills into government. However, we also run an academy working to make all of government more digitally aware, as well as giving professional development for digital specialists. So that was a very high level run through of how we consider digital government in the UK. But I just wanted to quickly touch on the current hot topic of the day, the impact of coronavirus. Now that underpinning infrastructure and framework in terms of our digital capability has meant, I just thought I'd run through some of the key things that we've been able to achieve over the last 12 weeks. So we created 77 new transactional services in 8 weeks, and we've got 45 more in development. Now they all be able to make use of our toolkits, our design frameworks. Our visitors to gov.uk per week have gone up over 600%, with over 132 million page views in any given week. And at its peak, our notification system that sends out emails and SMSs were sending over 8 million SMSs a day. That same system of notification was then also repurposed to allow members of Parliament and members of the House of Lords to conduct voting for the first time ever. So that was very exciting. Now I've got a few questions. I will just quickly finish running through this and then I'll come back to the questions if that's okay. I'm looking vaguely at Ashley.
We might do them at the end actually, Alex, okay. If that's all right.
That's fine. So just very, very briefly, I wanted to talk a little bit about the team that I work in, International. Now, my history in GDS is one of delivery. I have a delivery background. So I joined GDS about 6 years ago and headed up delivery for gov.uk website. I then moved into delivery for our gov.uk Verify Identity Assurance program, and also did a stint of running business operations for the whole organisation. Now I ran out of things to deliver, so I started looking at the huge number of inquiries that were coming into the UK government for, to understand our experience. And now I work in the international team, looking at how we can respond to those requests for help, requests for knowledge sharing, and how we form peer-to-peer relationships with governments. So we are about 3 years old now as a team, and we work with multilateral organisations, contributing to shaping international standards and sharing best practice through ongoing work with the World Bank, OECD, UN, International Telecommunications Union, and the Arab League. We're highly ranked in the UN and OECD digital government surveys. And as a consequence of this, there are lots of countries want to come and visit us. On average in peacetime, we host about 70 visits a year from foreign governments. But this third element of our work is peer-to-peer collaborative support to governments from around the world as they tackle their own transformation journeys. As civil servants ourselves who have been through this journey, and as an organisation that has developed methodologies in applying Agile specifically to government, we're currently supporting countries in Central Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, Southern Africa, South America, and the Middle East. So we're always happy to talk to anybody about our experience and how that might be useful for governments themselves. So that was a very whistle-stop tour of GDS, our experience of digital government and with the area that I work in. So I hope you found that in some way useful, and I'm looking forward to ongoing conversations with the rest of the panel.
Thank you very much, Alex. That's 10 years of hard work encapsulated in 10 minutes. So that's amazing. Thank you. I'd like to now welcome Amar Shuba from Management Partners. Hello, Amar. You might need to unmute yourself.
Hi, thanks very much.
Thank you. And who's going to talk more about his experience in Iraq with the government, and particularly touch on some of the issues that he sees ahead of him. So over to you, Amar. I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much. Let me try to share my screen if that's possible. Okay, very good. Are you able to see my screen?
Yep. Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. So let me introduce quickly myself and Management Partners. So we are a Middle East management consulting firm working across the GCC and the Gulf region. And have been working in Iraq for the last 10 years across multiple areas, from basically policy reforms, restructuring efforts, state-owned companies, privatization and restructuring, as well as basically on several digital transformation topics, be it basically of business company registration process redesign, or more recently on the e-payment reform, and have been basically advising different ministries on how they can basically better enhance their business processes through the use of electronic services. So one quick example I would like maybe to share with you is the work which we have done related to the business registration in Iraq as well in Kurdistan, where we helped them in a quick manner to redesign their business processes, as well as to conduct a quick automation system in order to enable them to provide their services online with minimum basically of physical interactions. Now with the limitation of that certain documents and IDs cannot be authenticated online at this moment, there's still basically a physical interaction required, but through basically the digitalization that can be basically reduced to a minimum with one-stop shop concept. So we were able basically to reduce the overall business process, which basically involved a number of entities from the Chamber of Commerce to the Ministry of Trade, which basically is heading the company registration office, to including basically the tax authority, Social Security, Ministry of Labor for the post-company registration. And we're able basically to reduce the overall process, which is took about 32 days to basically just 2 days, and reduce the overall interactions, the physical required interactions, to just 1 point, versus basically before 11 interaction points across various ministries. We basically set up very quickly an overall informative portals, which basically describes the overall process, the registration, and which basically provides as a start two services, one for local company registration as well as one for foreign company registration. And the process, which is basically supported electronically, starts from the name registration. So it basically allows to search for available company names, as well as register for them online. And with that new registered name, then to start the company registration, upload all required documents, receive a pre-approval on basically electronically. And once that pre-approval has been received, basically then go to the company registrar with that documents, where then the documents are verified, the fees are paid, and then directly afterwards, the company registration documents are issued. And then the post steps, which is basically receiving social security number and company tax number, will then happen basically automatically, where the investors are receiving those information then directly directly as an email afterwards from those authorities. And so we set up basically the portal supporting Arabic, Kurdish, as well as English, and providing basically also automated document generation. So one issue which was there, that the company, the article of association and the company contract itself was not very standardized. So every lawyer was using a different formulations, which then basically led to a higher rejection rate with the different company registration employees. The same thing was also for other documents like the board of directors. So we generated basically on the template form a standardized version, which is basically automated, generated out of the registration form, which then also helped basically to shorten the process and to shorten basically the rejection time. We helped them to set up and implement the system on a cloud-based solution using basically a workflow engine, which we customized based on the new process. We set up a customized portal, and we integrated with an integration engine, which allows them to access a portfolio of different automation services, as I mentioned, like automated document generations, automated email services, SMS services, and other basically direct automation service, including basically storing and archiving documents on basically a common SharePoint or shared drive for the employees then to access it, and for archiving purposes as well. So that's a little bit in terms of the example. I think what we did now for the company registration, there are a lot of other opportunities right now, especially within the COVID crisis situation, where Iraq needs to quickly automate and digitize their processes in order to enable continuation of their government services within the current COVID-19 situation and the limitation of movement, which citizens have, as well as basically government employees. So there's a chance right now to push forward and to enable an automation of a number of services very quickly, and to allow basically with that a basic continuation of the current government service apparatus. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ammar. And Ismail, if I could invite you to comment on your experience, and particularly, you know, is this the best time to make change in Iraq, and what's the appetite amongst the government that you might sense? Where is Iraq on this? Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley. Thanks, Alex. And thanks, Ammar. And hi, everyone. So just quick introduction. My name is Ismail Maraka. I am the country leader for IBBC in Iraq. And as most of you know, I mean, we have been operating in Iraq for over the past 15 years, and we've done a lot of government projects. Our first project was related to the development of a full-fledged strategy, IT strategy for the KRG region. That was almost 10 years ago. If I would just put this into today's context, so Iraq over the past 10 years, I mean, the good news, they've done so many strategies, and there are so many successful buckets of projects, just like the one Ammar mentioned. I mean, there are plenty of those that were developed on at the ministry level or individual basis. The other angle is that the private sector, when it comes to e-payment, has flourished. I mean, you know, due to the lack of e-banking, if you want. Today, Iraq, I mean, has several platforms that the government is relying on to make payments, whether it's salaries or registrations and what have you. So in order to move this faster, I mean, and to consolidate all these efforts, we would be, I mean, my view would be is to recommend establishing a committee at the prime minister level, because today, if you go into the cycle of who's going to own this and who's going to run this, it's just going to be, it's going to go through the bureaucratic government, typical government, I mean, delays. So our recommendation would be is to task a committee that has, you know, people from different ministries, whether it's from, you know, Ministry of Communication, Ministry of IT, KRG, CMC, possibly private sector who are involved in e-government, okay? And the tasks would be simple. I mean, one is to collect whatever we have today to see what is available out there. Secondly is to see what quick wins we can do and implement quickly, okay? And you would find out that you'll have plenty of those, because, you know, while these strategies may be outdated because of technology has changed, but if you want the RFPs that were issued or the projects that were recommended are valid today. The technology may have changed, but the projects are valid today. And Iraq could capitalize so much out of this. And simply, I mean, as Alex said, I mean, you would be saving on cost, you would be more efficient, and you will improve your cash collection. If I would put an example, okay, your tax authority, if you take the tax authority as a pilot and do a quick implementation there, okay, this will help the country in improving transparency when it comes to taxes, reduce corruption if you want, and improve cash flow. I mean, this is a simple example, and if you could take this across the different sectors, you will see the benefits. You will be able to harvest the benefits quite quickly. So with the new government, who is anxious to improve services, I think this is quite the best time for them to do it. They have so much that has been done, so they don't have to start from scratch, okay? And there are so many similar experiences in neighboring countries, okay, who would be able to help. Private sector would be able to help. And I'm sure companies like ours and Ammar and our colleagues from different Big Four would be anxious to help. And mind you, all the consulting firms almost have been operating in Iraq for some time now. and we all can bring this experience where we have done similar projects across the region into Iraq. Okay. I know, Alex, the UK is quite way advanced. We're still in the basic, but given Iraq is a green field, you don't have an excess luggage, so you can actually start and show impact quickly. With that, I hope some quick actions will be taken, and I hope this will be handled by a higher authority, just to remove the bureaucracy. We've seen it in different governments across the region. If you take ownership from the higher leadership, things happen much quicker and much more efficient. But I think this, other than the fact that you will improve efficiency, this will help Iraq in improving its image across the globe. Okay, and I hope, out of this conference, we will be able to support and help the government to move this to the next level. I think the time of studies and seeing the feasibility of doing what has passed. It's time for implementation, and I think the government should just focus on implementation, bring the right people into this committee, and make things happen.
Ismail, that's a terrifically optimistic and powerful point you make. I'd like to.
I am very happy about Iraq. I've been operating there for almost 20 years. I am very optimistic that one day it's going to be one of the greatest countries in the region, if not in the globe.
I think that's probably a view that most people share, particularly on this panel. I'd like to ask the question about capability and the implementation. Is there the capability in Iraq? Alex, what have you found in the UK in terms of ability to deliver things? And do you think Iraq, for example, Ammar, is ready to deliver? Has it got the delivery capability? And what needs to be done there?
Well, I think certainly in the UK, we're very, very fortunate, especially to be one of the digital hubs in the world, particularly in London. However, looking at one of these questions that were raised about how we sort of managed to get a third of our work out to SMEs, it was really about opening up the market, opening up to small companies, opening up to small innovators so that they had an opportunity to add something to government and for them to really grow and thrive in that space. And kind of thinking about that and what we've sort of seen as well from my perspective of going all around the world talking and working with international governments is that you've got to start somewhere, and your capability also has to start somewhere. And Iraq is a young country. It's got a lot of young people who are looking at how to make the most out of the digital environment. And so it's really to answer the first question there as well from Syed is, how do we lower those barriers and create the environment for success for digital companies, for whether they're local in Iraq, or they're national companies, or they're from overseas companies who want to work with Iraq. It's about how do you lower the barriers and remove those barriers to setting up companies, to working with governments, and to bring that capability in. Now, certainly in the UK, when 10 years ago, we had a very sophisticated private sector when it came to digital. However, we did not have a sophisticated civil service. So, we also had to look at how to get that right blend of the entrepreneurs from the private sector, people who understood how to run a large agile organization in a modern way, and bring them into government to think about how do we apply 21st century digital delivery and organization structure to the government. And that was really the challenge that they started looking at. And that was sort of where it started for us to really, really transform the capability within the civil service. But I certainly don't want to downplay that, it's a different place and we are at a different starting point from where you are in Iraq as well. However, digital has moved on a lot in 10 years. So you're potentially starting at a much more advanced place than we were 10 years ago as well.
Thank you. Ammar, what do you feel about the delivery within Iraq?
Look, I think as Ismail mentioned, I think there are some talents in the market, but I think delivery capabilities within the government sector is very limited. And it's very unorganized. And I think basically building on Ismail's point, if we want to move basically forward, I think there needs to be a centralized approach. I think it should not be basically the previous approach to basically give directorates and directives to the different line ministries, and they should basically come up with their IT solution, but rather basically make a push forward through a common platform. And there are some common components there. Obviously always needs to be ministry specific solutions and applications, but there's so much basically to gain right now through a centralized effort where basically capability can be bundled, and the effort to set up basically a common infrastructure platform to do that. One of them is, let's say, certain infrastructure services like payment integration and payment. Others, I think, which is common across all the basically solutions which are required, especially towards the citizens, is basically an workflow engine and an integration engine. So there are some common components and basically also an architectural setup which needs to be driven centrally. It needs to be done quickly, and that will basically help basically to launch a number of services on the ministry levels, on the government entity levels much quicker than basically to continue that more isolated instant solutions which have happened in the past.
Thank you. Can I just say, because Ismail has got to go, I think. So yeah. Ismail, would you like to say something before you make
I mean, I just want to add one thing to this quickly. Iraq is basically, I think, the population is like 50% is below 30. So you have all the young, capable people within Iraq. You just need to train them. Okay, this is an advantage. We've seen this in countries across the region where the young generation are just eager to learn and eager to contribute something. You just need to give them the room to do so.
Thank you. Sorry, Alex. Yes.
I was going to say that's such a good point as well. To kind of follow on from what Amir was saying about, thinking about common platforms and common and open standards. Certainly in the UK, having standards across government that we all agree that that's what good looks like, and we've all agreed that that's the standard that we want to follow. That means that we can control what good looks like. It means that we've got control of our technology ecosystem rather than proprietary providers. But it also means that departments can have autonomy in what it is that they're trying to achieve, that they can take the standards and operate within the realms of those. So we understand that we have a good, secure ecosystem that is going to work well for citizens and for businesses. However, within that, there is lots of room for innovation. There's lots of room for departments working in a way that they want to. But what we know is that then the citizens and businesses interacting with that are going to have a consistent experience. They're going to understand a lot faster how to interact with the state than if everyone's doing something slightly differently. So I do think that there's huge value in working with standards and with guidances, and then letting departments have autonomy within that to be able to innovate and deliver in a way that meets their needs.
Okay, thank you, Ashley. I have to drop off.
Ismail, thank you so much for coming. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. I'd just like to bring up this other question that some people say that, well, technology is the easy bit, the tech is easy bit. Actually, the hard bit is the people, the culture. And while we probably need to train more young people, which is a great solution, Amar, do you want to talk about the culture and Alex, how do you shift cultures? That's probably the hardest bit of all.
Yeah, for sure. I think, as you said, I think the technology is the easier bit. I think the more difficult part is changing mindset, changing behavior, and basically overcome the inherent interest of certain people, even if it's a smaller basically part of the organization, who is interested to keep basically the status quo, right? We always have to basically to appreciate that with new processes, with the technology, a new level of transparency comes across, which basically might not be in the interest of all people involved. And so that will basically in itself create resistance. People are afraid of change, and there might be powerful people who are afraid of that. So I think it's basically very, very important to be successful, to have a very strong political will to basically push that through. Especially if that's basically a process which goes across multiple entities. There are different interests. I mean, just in the example which we had with the Chamber of, with the company of business registration, obviously the Chamber of Commerce was not very much interested at the beginning about the process, because it basically would cut in a major part of their revenue, which is the name registration fee. And to give that out of their control and to embed it in a process which is basically then much more visible to the ministry was not an easy task. So again, it basically required Prime Minister intervention in order to make that happen. And we are talking about, let's say, a smaller piece versus other processes. So that gives you basically an idea about the resistance you have basically to deal with in order to set up the right process, in order to be able to implement it, and then going to the level of accepting. Obviously, then once you get that political will, there's obviously a lot of training required, a lot of workshops, hand-holding, and you need to take into consideration and appreciate that also once you set up a system, that system will not basically have to be fixed in stone. A lot of things you will learn once you basically set up the new process. You will basically realize that certain things does not necessarily work how you basically thought about it. You don't have already now, let's say, very mature processes. There's going to be a big change. So people not necessarily expect specifically know how the future process will look like. So you cannot basically follow a waterfall model by just basically, oh, I have the perfect specification, now I implement it, and everything will be working fine. So you basically have to plan an iterative process of basically continuously learning, adjusting, updating it, and basically with that improving the system. So again, I think that's all part of a change which needs basically to be managed and to take into consideration.
One of the questions there is what sort of success was there in the sign-up you had in the KRG? In our earlier conversation, I think you said it was 100%, and that you got them all to sign up in the end. Is that right?
Yeah, so I think that was the easy part because there was no alternative, right? So the process was basically from one day to the other. It has basically to follow the new digital process. So the only thing what happens basically all the applications which started on the paper trail were basically completed on the paper trail. Every new application has to go.
But it has like a lot of issues.
Okay.
Sorry. Yes. So,
so they had no alternative. They had to do it, and then as a consequence, they all had to migrate there. Is that the?
Yes, exactly. So I think what basically, again, the process itself has basically to follow the new electronic process. Now, access to the process is again mobile, smartphone. Availability is big. Most people basically have internet connections. Nevertheless, so if people don't have it, that still has the possibility to basically go to one of the company registration office, where then the employees would help them to type that into the system. But at the end of the day, the process itself will still go through the system, even though if you would basically take the company registration office or any other typing office, which basically would enter that on behalf of the applicant.
Thank you. And Alex, would you like to comment on the political will, the ability, how do you get the culture change through? Because the Brits had to go through a culture change too.
Yes, certainly. And I think, you know, there is that element of like, you have to have that political will, you know, that definitely we found that we had to have that with Francis Maud. And although we had that, it was then an enormous job, and we're still doing it to some extent to change the hearts and the minds of the rest of government to come along this journey. You know, as soon as you sort of start taking or moving authority over something around and telling a department how they're going to deliver something, you know, that causes an enormous friction and understandably resistance in some cases. And we did really feel a shift when, after a few exemplars or a few pilots had been successful, and people started feeling the benefit. Both politicians were getting positive feedback from the people that they were serving, because maybe it was easier for someone to apply for a benefit, or it was easier for someone to get their business driver's license, so that they could do some international trade. Any of these things were becoming easier. So this kickback for politicians was one thing. The financial kickbacks also was another, when there was consistent and continuous pressure on the UK government to shrink how much it was spending on administration and operational services. And you think about things like call centres. Call centres were just the largest financial suck on the government, because everyone rings up saying, where's my thing? Have you got my thing? Where's my passport? Am I going to get my passport back? Those low value calls are just creating a huge economy of themselves. So as soon as you start pushing information out to citizens or to people by a low cost message saying, we've got your application and we're going to send it back to you in 5 days, that's just saved a telephone call. So, you automatically start seeing the reduction in price in call centres, more valuable calls and interactions happening with civil servants and public. Those financial gains, people being able to spend more on other things, but also, as I said, those political kickbacks where ministers are suddenly able in the newspaper to kind of say, yeah, I did that digital thing over there. That was definitely my idea. All of a sudden, we sort of started to see this massive shift and an acceleration of the transformation work that we were trying to do. I think one of the other big things was with our existing civil servants, to help them understand that there was still a role for them to play in government, that they weren't all going to lose their jobs, that there was an incentive for them to change. I think it's very difficult for people who work in an institution like a civil service to want to change if they don't see a benefit or an incentive for them to do so. So helping to develop digital skills across the whole of the civil service has really helped us to revitalise the civil servants, to help people still feel relevant, and to actually focus on how to deliver policy well, as opposed to just shuffling papers around. So it is a long-term process, though, I would say, in terms of the organisation change. But I think that we would have struggled had we not had such a strong minister at the very start of our journey, who was prepared to have those political back and forths, to stand his ground and to say, let's just continue to give it a try, because everything we've done up to this point hasn't worked and we need to change. So that certainly was a key part for us. And then it's just kind of like accepting that it's a long-term organisation and culture change, but how to give people incentives along the way and really, really help people to see them.
Thank you, Alex. That's a good roadmap there. Amar, I think we probably will come to concluding thoughts here. A lot of the questions are often statements that I'm seeing. And I think, to be honest, we've covered a lot of the questions there. Is there anything you'd like to end with, Amar? Just some final thoughts, particularly the current appetite of the Iraqi government. How do you read that?
Look, I think the Iraqi government faces a number of challenges right now. One is basically the impact of the COVID-19 in terms of business continuity, but also financially. It also faces a financial crisis right now, which needs basically to address due to basically the overall economic impact of COVID-19, but also due to the reduced oil price. And so these are basically urgent matters which Iraq needs to be addressing right now in the new Iraqi government. On top of that, there are also long-term structural elements which basically Iraq needs to adjust, which is basically economic diversification, but also importantly, government efficiency and reduction of bureaucracy. As well as basically an education reform, which is basically education for for employment. Now, as part of basically those priorities, e-government and digital transformation plays an important role. And I hope that basically the Iraqi government understands and takes the current situation as an opportunity to push things forward, which basically would, in a different situation, would create it much more basically political resistant, and takes now that opportunity to implement a lot of already existing or previously existent e-government plans, which basically were only taken half-heartedly, now basically which are much bigger urgency, and to set up things and to utilize them. And then in the same context, I think it helps if they would push forward, as we discussed, in terms of business continuity. It helps also in many situations in terms of fiscal consolidation, be basically able to have a better collection rate on taxes, on fees, etc. As well as basically helps in terms of increasing government efficiency, and with that basically able to reduce the overall current bureaucracy which exists in the Iraqi government.
Thank you very much. So in effect, digital transformation could help all of these areas effectively. It is one of the keys that can help all the problems of Iraq. Alex, is there anything you'd like to leave us with in terms of your thoughts?
I mean, I think Ismail said something earlier that really resonated with me in terms of just starting and stopping talking about it, and just starting, because you can talk yourself into circles about these, and it can become very, very political. You can get lots of bureaucracy in terms of which department's in charge of what. And I would really say, to just start. You've got to start somewhere. And for those departments who are willing to take those first steps into the unknown, or willing to go into somewhere where they're less comfortable, and be those early adopters, be those exemplars, and work with experts in the private sector to help start stimulating that digital economy. Start looking at how do you bring the youth in, how do you have those entry-level programs, and help the youth understand that it's possible to have an interesting and rewarding career in the civil service. These are the types of places that I would really encourage the government of Iraq to just start, because you've got to start somewhere. So, leading the way with those who are ready to take those risks, to really demonstrate the benefits and the value of organisation change and digitalisation was certainly one of the things that we really felt was beneficial to us, those departments who are willing to take the leap.
Well, could I thank you both extremely for your time and your wisdom. I hope you can work together in some way sometime. Just to thank Alex Seagrove from the UK Cabinet Office, from Ismail Maraka, PwC, and Amar Shubar from Management Partners. Thank you very much indeed. And just to flag up what's coming next, we have the idea of looking at remote working, which I think is a pretty current issue at the moment. So I'm just talking to Botan Osman of Restrata to talk about remote working, and maybe we have a few consultancies on that too. That's probably in a couple of weeks. And then next Monday, at this time, we should be having another advisory panel report with the Chatham House Institute and the University of Sulaymaniyah, which is an open public forum on Iraq 2020 at the crossroads, what can be done in the future. In the meantime, I'd like to thank you all for logging in and sharing and staying with us. This will be a video available via our website. And once again, thanks very much to all the panelists, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Thank you very much. Goodbye.